Rain saw that the situation was similar to what he had perceived before. Those individuals had at least the strength of veteran knights, while most of the others were of formal knight strength. That red-haired beauty is Eveline Norman, the daughter of Viscount Norman of Rossby County. Pretty, isn't she? Indeed, very beautiful. Rain nodded, noting the woman had a demeanor somewhat like Clea's. Additionally, having just a few female knights among a group of males made them stand out considerably. What are they doing, socializing? Rain casually asked. Making connections, so if there's a team task, everyone will be somewhat familiar with each other. Hass explained. Rain silently nodded, not saying anything. After staying for a short while, Rain went back to his hotel room. On the training grounds, it wasn't possible to display his true strength, for it would be too conspicuous. The next morning, the young knights were all gathered, and only then did Rain learn that there were so many candidates participating in the Rossby City candidacy assessment. He counted nearly 70 or 80. However, upon reflection, in such a vast area as Minster Province, this number of people didn't seem too many. The few counties contributing as little as 7 or 8, while others had just over 10. At that moment, a burly naval commodore strode over, followed by the slender naval commander Marika Morales and a guard. Ladies and gentlemen, the future hopes of the Empire, welcome to Rossby City, the base of the 6th Division of the Imperial South Sea Fleet. This morning we need to do 2 things, draw lots and go over the rules, the Commodore announced. His speech was crisp in true military fashion, and he quickly got to the point. Everyone come up and draw lots. Odd numbers are individual challenges, and even numbers are team missions, he said. The Commander Marika gestured to the small box held by the guard, signifying for everyone to pick one. Soon, it was Rain's turn. 32 a team mission. Rain didn't expect to draw a team mission. He vividly remembered Hamilton's words cautioning him that, in a team mission, he had to be wary not just of the enemies but of certain teammates as well. What a hassle, individual challenges would have been so much simpler. Oh, you got a team mission. Rain, you're really lucky, Hass said, looking enviously at Rain. Not like me. Ending up with an individual challenge. Damn it, Rain glanced at Hass, his inner thoughts filled with irony. If only I could switch with you, Hass, I'd be eager to trade places. Rain thought to himself. At this moment, many young people who had also drawn team tasks began whispering amongst themselves as if coordinating something, with many faces showing delight. At this time, the burly Navy Commodore continued to speak. All assessment personnel must strictly adhere to one rule, which is to use only their own strength, and the use of external forces, such as sorcery scrolls, transcendental potions, etc., is absolutely prohibited. Find more to read at Empire. Of course, ordinary weapons and equipment, hemostatic medication, and bandages are not included in this prohibition. Sir, may I ask if I can use a bit of witchcraft? For example, the light body skill from the Wind Witchcraft series, would that be considered a breach of rules? Asked a young man who appeared to be of common birth, suddenly raising his hand to inquire. Rain, upon hearing this, couldn't help but look up at the young man, realizing that the question he wanted to ask had been raised by the other party. You may. As I've said, use of one's own strength is allowed. If there are no questions, then at 7 o'clock tonight we shall set off. Please ensure everyone is prepared for battle. As for the specific tasks, due to the need for confidentiality, they will be distributed to you after we depart. If anyone wishes to withdraw, you can now register your withdrawal with Major Marika, declared the Navy Commodore. His piercing gaze sweeping around, Rain felt as if those substantial eyes were upon him, and for an instant locked gazes with the Commodore before quickly lowering his head again. This slight sense of oppression, great knight strength? Rain couldn't help but speculate inwardly. If there are no further questions, you are dismissed, the Navy Commodore announced. Everyone then dispersed, discussing in small groups, and Rain followed the crowd back to the naval home inn. Strange, why did that young man trigger my alarm response? Could it be that his strength is sufficient to threaten me? It shouldn't be. I haven't heard that any scions from the upper nobility of Minster Province are here this time. The Navy Commodore pondered briefly, shook his head, and walked away, talking to himself. At 7 o'clock sharp in the evening, about 30 personnel participating in the team task gathered, and under the leadership of the Navy Commodore and several officers, boarded a 20-meter-long sail-less swift boat. Upon boarding, Rain noticed that there were already several middle-aged men dressed in noble hunting attire within the cabin, who appeared to be officials from the Ennoblement Assessment Committee. After everyone had taken their seats in the cabin, an officer distributed a stack of papers. As the vessel progressed, the Commodore said resonantly, "The details of this assessment task have been distributed. You'll find them in your hands, along with recommendations for achieving different levels of rating specified at the bottom." Following the Commodore's explanation, Rain quickly scanned the contents of the paper. Qualifying rating: kill recommendation. Kill more than 12 bloodsail pirates, the more the better. Note: the blood-colored headband on the enemy's head is the best proof, as you can't ensure that an assessor will see every bloodsail pirate you kill. Good rating: kill recommendation. Kill 5 bloodsail pirate chiefs, whose strength is about that of a provisional knight. Or kill 1 bloodsail pirate boatswain or someone of higher rank, generally of full knight strength or slightly stronger. Note: if capable, it is advised to aim for the latter for a chance at a higher rating. Excellent rating: kill recommendation. Kill bloodsail pirate first mates and those of higher rank. Their strength is about that of a senior and even peak knight. Note: dangerous. It is not recommended for those of insufficient strength to take unnecessary risks. Killing bloodsail pirates, huh? Why didn't they tell us in advance? At least we could have prepared something specific. Many whispered among themselves. At this moment, a middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache, dressed in noble hunting garb, took over the conversation from the Navy Commodore, saying, "Your ennoblement assessment task this time is not as simple as just clearing out the bloodsail pirates, but in fact to collaborate on a secret mission of the Imperial Navy. According to reliable information, a secret messenger from the Eagle Federation has already arrived at bloodsail pirate-infested Maritet Island. Therefore, the Ennoblement Assessment Committee decided to inform you of the specific task only after departure." Rain nodded in understanding. No wonder the specific task was only disclosed now. Such secret missions are naturally safer the later the information is disseminated. After the man with the handlebar mustache concluded his briefing, the Navy Commodore nodded to him with a smile and continued. "Of course, the strength of Bloodsail Pirate Group leader Willie McCoy, known as Bloody Hand Willie and a great knight, is beyond your concern, as he will naturally be dealt with by Imperial Navy officers. First Mate and Captain Clout Dagan of the Rurik, Diviner and Captain Mala Nasser of the Wreckage, Captain Bilkul Jamal of the Hook, all possess peak knight strength, and likewise it is advisable for you to avoid them." Hearing this, Rain's eyes subtly shifted as he looked at the 4 wanted sketches on the paper, deep in thought. The first to catch his eye was the portrait of Bloodsail Pirate Group leader Willie McCoy. You neatly bound into small braids on either side of the ears, dense lower jaw beard also tied into a braid, with a broad mouth and large eyes. Although wearing only a captain's hat, he exuded an extraordinary aura of a formidable figure. Overview: the leader of the Bloodsail Pirate Gang, Willie McCoy, was once an Imperial officer with the strength of a great knight. He mastered the Imperial military swordsmanship, black shark breathing technique, and an unknown form of boxing, and he was skilled with a knight's longsword, rapier, and finger tiger. Due to his ability to resolve most conflicts with a pair of iron finger tigers alone, and his capability to punch straight through the chest and abdomen of a fully armored official knight with one punch, he was known as Bloody Hand Willie. Note: his close combat prowess is extremely strong, and if detected, it is strongly advised to avoid him. Finger tiger, Rain knew about that. Typically consisting of 4 connected iron rings. The back of a finger tiger features a semicircular iron hoop that is held in the palm of the hand, while the 4 rings fit over the index, middle, ring, and little fingers respectively. Additionally, some finger tigers have steel spikes added to the heads to further increase the damage dealt. If worn by someone proficient in boxing, both the speed and power of their attacks are quite formidable. The next one is the second in command of the Bloodsail Pirates and captain of the ruler, Clout Dagan. From his portrait, this is a standard handsome man, handsome face plus a goatee, looking more like a noble than a pirate. Overview: the deputy leader of the Bloodsail Pirates and captain of the ruler, Clout Dagan. Fallen noble of the Empire, possesses the strength of a peak knight and has mastered bloodsail swordsmanship and an unknown breathing technique. He is skilled with a knight's longsword, nicknamed the Gentleman Pirate. Note: second only to Bloody Hand Willie in strength, it is recommended to avoid him if encountered. The third person made Rain's pupils shrink. It was a knight combined with a wizard apprentice. Interesting. The third portrait depicted Diviner and captain of the wreck, Mala Nasser. This was a hooded man. his face slightly pale and almost devoid of beard, looking quite young. From the weather-beaten look around his eyes, Rain believed his actual age was not small. Overview: Diviner and captain of the wreck, Mala Nasser, of unknown origin, possesses the strength of a seasoned knight and a second-level wizard apprentice, clearly mastering aquatic plant divination and the hydrotherapy witchcraft. Other witchcraft skills unknown, proficient in bloodsail swordsmanship. Mala Nasser is adept at divination and healing and has a good reputation among the bloodsail pirates. Note: due to the unknown extent of his mastery in witchcraft, it is recommended to avoid him if encountered. The last person painted, the fourth, was the captain of the Hook. Bilkul Jamal. He had a signature hooked arm and a mouth full of rotten teeth from a pipe, indeed looking most like the kind of pirate who drifts at sea day and night. Overview: Captain of the Hook, Bilkul Jamal, an old bloodsail pirate drifting at sea for over 30 years, has exceptional naval experience. Being the most senior in the bloodsail pirate gang, he was mainly responsible for lateral communication with other pirate gangs and enjoyed some renown among them. Nicknamed Old Rotter. Note: although he is older, his cunning and trickiness should not be underestimated. Inexperienced fighters are advised not to engage him in combat. At that moment, Rain's ears twitched slightly, as he faintly heard some people discussing something amidst the noise of the crowd. Choose the fourth one, nicknamed Old Rotter. Bilkul should be the easiest to kill. We can go for that one. Right, the others are too strong, too dangerous. But Nazbai might choose the fourth too. If they beat us to it, we'll just go for the second one. I have high-level armor. If it's just swordsmanship, we should be able to fight. Yeah, too bad that Diviner knows witchcraft. Too dangerous, one curse and we're done. Rain looked up, recognizing the speakers as the noble's progeny Hassan had once mentioned, who were among the top contenders in the credential exams. An excellent evaluation would involve killing the first mate, but naturally, it would be even better to take down a captain directly. However, from what had just been revealed between the lines, it appeared not to be so simple. These men likely had the same target as him. Were they aiming to achieve a high enough score to receive an invitation to become a sword bearer? Returning his gaze, Rain's eyes swept past the portraits of the four individuals once more, and finally they went back up, lingering a bit longer on the portraits of Bloody Hand Willie and Diviner Mala. Then, Rain continued looking down. On the paper, following the portraits of these four key figures, were the designs of two pirate ships. One a four-masted bark and the other a three-masted bark. The four-masted bark was Bloody Hand Willie's flagship, looking almost identical to the regular main force barks of the Imperial Navy, which got Rain thinking. The three-masted barks, however, belonged to the other three pirate captains. Likely all manufactured in the shipyards of Rosby City, they shared mostly similar boat structures. Therefore, the three-masted barks could share one design diagram. Rain mainly focused on the placement of the captain's quarters, the first mates and the bosun's and other high-ranking staff quarters, taking a detailed look. The captain's quarters in these three-masted barks were usually positioned just shy of the stern, on the second deck level. If it were moored at the harbor, Rain estimated the draft of the sailboat to be about 4 meters above the waterline base. On the design plans, additionally, the design plans showed that the captain's cabin was equipped with a small side window, some circular, others semi-circular. Thus, they were quite easy to recognize, especially if there was a light on in the opponent's room. This made Rain nod slightly to himself. However, a note on the design plan indicated the hull thickness of the three-masted sailboats was about 30 centimeters, and that of the four-masted ones nearly 40 centimeters. This made Rain's eyebrows furrow slightly once again. At the bottom of the paper was a structure resembling an ancient castle, 2 stories high and housing dozens of rooms in size. From the annotations beside it, Rain learned that this was the main base of the Bloody Hand pirates on Maritet Island, known as Bloody Hand Fortress, built from the island's massive rocks, very sturdy. However, the pirates preferred to call it the Little Fortress. Seeing this, a mixture of ships and fortress, Rain couldn't help but wonder, were they planning to split forces for the battle? One team responsible for boarding combat, another for assaulting the Little Fortress. At this moment, someone suddenly asked, "Sir, is this going to be a boarding battle? Are those leaders on their ships or in the Bloody Hand Fortress?" Sure enough, Rain wasn't the only one puzzled. "We don't know yet," the naval commodore shook his head and said. "However, once we disembark, we should find out. It will not be a boarding combat but rather an assault on the ship," he added. What you need to do is familiarize yourself with the structural plans of both the ships and the fortress, the Commodore further instructed. At this point, a middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache, dressed in noble hunting attire, reminded everyone. Lastly, I want to remind everyone that unexpected situations can arise during combat. In some cases, even the few of us responsible for the assessment might not be able to rescue in time. So please cherish your life and don't overreach, he added. He paused for a moment and said reassuringly, even if you do not pass the nobility examination this time, you can still apply again in 5 years. Although the man said this, Rain looked up slightly and felt that not many were taking it to heart. Since most had signed up for the nobility examination, they believed in their own abilities. And for the few 27 or 28-year-olds, with age being a penalizing factor, this could be their last chance. After all, in 5 more years, they would be in their 30s, and unless their skills reached the level of a veteran knight, the hope of passing the nobility examination would naturally become slimmer. Hence, for them, going all out in the fight seemed to be the preferred choice. Isn't there a saying from the previous life? Strike it big, a bicycle becomes a motorcycle. Now they strike it big, a commoner becomes a noble, so they naturally had to go for it. Now that the objective was clear, Rain slowly removed the chrome iron suit he was wearing and put on the leather armor made from otter skin. Fighting in the cramped space of a ship's cabin, being more agile could offer significant advantages. Besides, wearing heavy armor would be quite awkward if one fell into the water. Moreover, Rain had the iron skin LV3 transcendent trait, which naturally made him more suited for combat in leather armor. After shedding over 100 pounds of weight, Rain immediately felt much lighter. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, they arrived at Maritet Island. Only then did everyone realize that another ship followed behind them, from which dozens of elite naval assault troopers, dressed in the light armor of swordsmen and accompanied by crossbows, as well as more than 10 naval officers, disembarked in orderly fashion. It seemed that these were the main attacking forces. Oh, she actually came too. Rain quickly noticed one of the officers was someone he was familiar with, the female major named Mary, who had been responsible for receiving them at the Navy's home inn. However, Mary was not the only woman there. There were also 2 other female officers, who were likely responsible for recording, communication, and coordination. As Rain jumped off the ship, his dark vision allowed him to easily discern his surroundings. The island was not large, and the first thing that caught his eye was the low fortress at the island's center. Despite being labeled a castle, it indeed resembled more of a small fortress. This was obviously the Bloody Hand Fortress. Rain could vaguely make out several guns, their dark metal gleaming, mounted on the walls of the little fortress. Besides, there was the makeshift dock about 200 to 300 meters to their left, where a 4-masted sailboat, 3 3-masted warships, and several small boats were moored. Clearly, these were the main ships of the Bloody Hand pirates and the 2 kinds of vessels depicted in the design plans. At that moment, a middle-aged man dressed as a pirate with a red headband suddenly emerged from the front, about a dozen meters away from the bushes, startling everyone. But the naval commodore seemed to have expected the man to be waiting for them and calmly asked, "What's the situation now?" "Sir, because the Bloody Hand pirates are on high alert for an attack from the Imperial Navy, Willie has arranged the meeting with the messenger on the central 4-masted sailboat, the flagship, Bloody Hand. From the banquet up until now, Bloody Hand Willie and the messenger haven't come out, and they should still be on the flagship. The other 3 3-masted sailboats are also on full alert. Including the captains and first mates, they are all aboard. Find exclusive stories on Empire." So, it's actually the small fortress that's the weakest in defense. Due to the absence of its core members, the spy disguised as a bloodsail pirate quickly reported the latest situation. Rain nodded slightly. It turned out there was a secret informant inside. No wonder the Commodore said we would know the situation as soon as we landed. Looking at the current situation, it seemed they were planning to assault the pirate ships. However, from here to the makeshift dock where the pirate schooners were moored first, they would have to walk along a rocky path, reach a beach with 4 or 5 signal bonfires burning, and only after that could they engage in shipboard combat. At that moment, at the end of the path, Rain could see a line of torches slowly moving toward them. It seemed likely to be a pirate patrol, and on the beach over 100 meters away, there were the vague figures of 20 to 30 pirates stirring. It looks like they would have to clear out the trash fish before boarding the ships. At this time, the naval commodore spoke up. The assessment will now officially begin. You are all clear about the situation, and there will be someone keeping a record of all your kills. Let's begin. At this, 7 or 8 newly knighted archers took the lead, moving out in front. Others, a bit more cautious, hid aside with their bows drawn, aiming at the group of pirates carrying torches as they approached. The ambush came from trained knights against the unsuspecting Bloodsail pirates who were mere good fighters. Pirates had no time to mount any effective resistance. The knights took aim and whoosh, whoosh, quickly shot down the 7 or 8 patrolling Bloodsail pirates without even letting them scream. The record keepers behind them then began busily noting down the scores. As they continued along the path, they soon brought about the demise of a second Bloodsail pirate patrol squad. By the time everyone reached the beach, the most successful of the newly knighted had already made 8 consecutive kills on the Bloodsail pirates, a bow expert among them. And by the bonfires on the beach, while the numbers of Bloodsail pirates weren't few, when the time came to attack, was still an embarrassment of riches, especially one pirate leader, whose death was particularly gruesome, instantly struck by 2 sword thrusts and 4 sharp arrows. This was despite several knights carrying heavy weapons having had no opportunity to showcase their skills, because most of the time they had to silence their enemies stealthily. After all, they hadn't officially started the shipboard combat yet, so even if they were going to alert the enemy, it couldn't be so soon. The newly knighted, armed with heavy weapons naturally, didn't move as nimbly as the other knights. Rain glanced to the side and saw dozens of elite naval assault troopers, already holding strong bows or crossbows, aiming at the Bloodsail pirates, confirming his guess even more. So, when the dozens of pirates on the beach had been neatly dispatched, some of the new knights still hadn't made any moves. The journey continues at Empire. Among them was one next to Rain, also carrying a warhammer, who now couldn't hide the anxiety on his face. He had been planning an ambush on a Bloodsail pirate, but was vexed when an arrow from another direction snatched away his target prey. Although he glared in rage, there was nothing he could do. However, seeing Rain calm and composed, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why aren't you worried at all?" "The fastest among them have already met the 12-kill requirement for the assessment," he added. "Ah, no worries. Moreover, I'm not skilled in archery." Rain shrugged. The other glanced at the dual-handed greatsword and 2-handed warhammer on Rain's back and couldn't help but offer consolation with a feeling of shared misery. "Indeed, you didn't even bring a bow. That makes it even tougher." "Sigh, I wish I had practiced archery well," the other knight sighed. At this point, Rain stepped forward, picked up a thick plank that seemed to be used for ship repairs, coated on one side with tung oil. He examined it carefully in his hands, then forcefully broke it in 2. He nodded to himself. By this time, the Bloodsail pirates had been cleaned up from the beach, and the main event, the boarding battle, was about to begin. Everyone thought the Commodore would step forward and make arrangements, but to their surprise, the 20 or so naval officers and the nobles in hunting attire tasked with the examination didn't seem to have the intention of interfering. They just stood back smiling as they watched how the rest would act. Quickly, quite a few gathered spontaneously around some of the most powerful scions of nobility. At this moment, a man Rain had just heard of, Nazbai, led about a dozen people towards the Barbhaken. At the same time, several naval officers who were peak knights followed, along with the black-clothed examiners and the statisticians, who also promptly followed suit, since each ship had a figurehead at its bow. Like the Barbhaken with its large curved hook, recognition was quite simple, of course. Not all the participants in the examination chose to take part in the boarding combat because, according to the spy's intel, the easiest target should be the small fortress nearby, which almost lacked enemies of peak knight status. So a significant number of people spontaneously formed groups and charged towards the small fortress. With those 2 groups moving out, the remaining group wasn't large, including Rain. There were only about 10 people left. "Pesk, a bunch of loafers," a noble scion said disdainfully. "Only those who come with me to Ruler will get a good evaluation. It's tough to get it at the small fortress," he continued. "I'll take care of Gentleman Pirate Clout." Upon hearing that he could withstand the most troublesome second in command of the Bloody Sails, the rest of the newly minted knights looked at each other. It was clear they were not content with just a passing evaluation. They aimed for a good one. After a moment's thought, most of the others followed the noble scion to Ruler, docked next to Hook. After all, their numbers were no longer sufficient to attack another pirate ship. In other words, of the two remaining pirate ships. One was a four-masted vessel, the flagship Bloodsail. Bloody Hand Willie of great knight strength clearly being the Navy's target. The captain on the other wreckage was a mysterious professional with strange methods and equally troublesome. "Rain, aren't you going?" The Big Hammer Knight walked a few steps and seeing Rain still unmoving turned his head and asked in confusion. Rain shook his head slightly and said, "I'm not going." "All right then, if it doesn't work out, given your youth, you should still be able to get a passing evaluation at the small fortress." In the glow of the campfire, the Big Hammer Knight saw Rain's youthful face, assuming that it was a lack of strength that kept him from acting until now. "As for me, I plan to follow and see if there is a chance to get a good evaluation," said the Big Hammer Knight before quickly heading toward Ruler. Now, the only ones left on the beach without taking action were Rain and a red-haired female knight. Rain glanced at her. He seemed to remember his mentioning her at the training field, something about her being Evelyn, the daughter of a certain viscount from Rossby County. Evelyn also looked up at Rain, this youth carrying two heavy weapons that she hadn't seen before at the training field, seemingly popping up out of nowhere. Evelyn was curious, while she planned to join the Navy. In attacking Bloodsail, she wondered what this young man planned to do. Could he possibly be thinking the same as her? The pretty Navy Major Merica also noticed Rain still on the beach and found it strange. In her opinion, this young man's strength was far from poor. After all, knights proficient with dual-handed heavy weapons rarely lack strength, especially someone who carried a dual-handed greatsword and an additional heavy hammer. But him staying on the beach couldn't mean he planned to attack the flagship, could it? You see, in a Navy commando team's group attack, most of the time you wouldn't even find an opportunity to strike before the enemy was killed. Unless you planned to duel with the higher-ups of the Bloody Sails, perhaps the Navy would give you that opportunity. At that moment, Rain suddenly started moving. He made his way alone towards the northernmost three-masted ship, wreckage the ship of the diviner Mala Nasser. It was known that no examinees had chosen this warship because it was manned by a wizard apprentice whose strength was a mystery. The Navy Rear Admiral, preparing to divide forces to attack Bloodsail and wreckage, was taken aback by Rain's action. But the next second he waved his hand, and Major Merica, along with an officer of peak knight strength, quickly got the cue and followed immediately behind Rain. Is he going to scout for information by himself? Wearing leather armor, carrying heavy weapons, such an odd style. Even if he can sneak in and scout out first-hand information, this evaluation counts kills. Surely this young man doesn't think that scouting information alone will get him a passing evaluation. Besides, if he is discovered, he will immediately be surrounded by pirates, and the mission would essentially be a failure. The Navy officer following Rain thought, as several questions arose in his mind. However, strangely enough, when Rain got near the wreckage, he stopped. He looked up, scanning the rear of the ship for a while. Then, he simultaneously removed the dual-handed greatsword and the heavy hammer from his back. This action, both the Navy officer and Major Merica exchanged a questioning glance, seeing the confusion in each other's eyes. Why take out both heavy weapons? Was he planning to use them as single-handed weapons? That would be quite unlikely. At this moment, on the sunken ship, inside the captain's quarters, Captain Mala Nasser, dressed in a black robe, was not fiddling with his bottles and jars. Instead, he was unusually engaged in discussion with his first mate and the ship's boatswain. The first mate was a one-eyed middle-aged man with a rough face and a fierce demeanor, clearly possessing the strength of at least a senior knight. He said, "Boss, why do you oppose collaborating with Bloody Hand Willie and the Eagle Federation? I've examined the 50 matchlock guns they brought this time. They are well crafted and powerful, seemingly quite sincere. Although such matchlock guns don't pose a threat to us, the Transcendent Knights, for the brothers under our command, having more of these guns would substantially increase their combat ability. Yes, boss, speak to Bloody Hand Willie, distribute a few more to us on the sunken ship. The brothers have been complaining to me all day." The boatswain, a big man with a full beard, also chimed in at this point. Mala, with a worried look, glanced up at the two of them and said, "We can cooperate with other pirates, but if we partner with the Eagle Federation, I'm afraid we'll become a thorn in the Empire's side if they find out. Moreover, do you think the Eagle Federation is really here to help us? They just want to use us to further weaken the Imperial Navy." The one-eyed first mate and the bearded boatswain, both no fools, immediately realized the implications of Mala's words and exchanged glances. "Why don't you divine that, boss? The one-eyed middle-aged man hesitated, then suggested as an idea occurred to him. I've already divined it. Although the results were neither good nor bad, I have a nagging feeling that something is off, as if the divination was interfered with. Mala explained as he paced. However, I plan to divine it again right now. Mala's face tensed up with determination. This time he planned to attempt the blood grass divination. A more advanced method than the aquatic plant divination. Blood grass divination requires mixing the diviner's own blood with aquatic plants, thereby increasing the accuracy of the divination. However, this more advanced method of divination, due to its toll on the body, was seldom used by Mala, but the keen senses of a wizard apprentice seemed to warn him that danger was imminent. Especially since this evening, his eyelids had been twitching non-stop by the dockside. The attack on the Bloodsail pirate flagship Bloodsail had been launched. Led by 4 naval officers with the strength of peak knights, the Navy's assault team followed closely behind, with the rear guarded by a rear admiral and another expert. Meanwhile, the Navy's assault team left behind 15 men who, under the command of another naval officer, seemed poised to simultaneously strike the sunken ship. By the way, Leonard, how long will the divination interference around Maritet Island last, sir? It will last until dawn, if only a wizard apprentice performs the divination. I believe they won't detect any problems, a confident naval colonel behind the rear admiral spoke up. Execution of divination interference is a routine procedure for some special operations. The rear admiral nodded, then turned to a middle-aged man in hunting attire with a handlebar mustache and said, Lord Theo, let us then go and meet Bloody Hand Willie and the Eagle Federation's envoy. Certainly, I'd also like to see the prowess of Bloody Hand Willie. Theo, the head of the examination team, agreed with a smile. Huh. At that moment, the rear admiral seemed to sense something and turned his head towards the direction where Rain was. At that moment, Rain, with a greatsword in each hand, began murmuring a spell. High-temperature field. As the deep incantation began, a subtle change appeared around Rain's body after 3 seconds. Although from an outsider's perspective, Rain's form was still clearly visible, the difference in temperature caused a change in air density, creating a refraction of light. Simply put, if an enemy were to thrust a sword at Rain's eye, there might be a slight deviation, diverting the strike to Rain's forehead or another nearby area instead. The next second, Rain's figure suddenly expanded, his muscles swelling as if inflated, doubling in size. Luckily, he had switched to an otter skin armor, which was more elastic than metallic plate armor, thus preventing it from bursting suddenly. Suddenly, with a motion akin to throwing a javelin, Rain forcefully hurled the glimmering greatsword toward the stern of the sunken ship, anchored about 20 to 30 meters away. Swish! In an instant, the greatsword flew like a giant arrow straight toward the stern at a high velocity, so fast that only a bright blur was visible. By the time the sound reached everyone's ears, the greatsword had already embedded itself in the ship's hull at the stern, piercing through several tens of meters of the thick ship's outer shell, and leaving about a meter of shiny blade humming and vibrating. With limit break and the superhuman trait Huge Strength LV3 activated, Rain forcefully pushed off, sprinting towards a small boat moored by the shore. The next second, Rain stepped onto the deck of the little boat, instantly causing a creaking sound from the deck, overwhelmed by the force. Apparently, Rain was using the small boat as a stepping stone. His powerful step immediately pressing the boat's body down several dozen centimeters. Immediately following, he leapt into the air again like a large bird and flew toward the stern of the 3-masted sailboat The Wreck. At this moment, the beautiful Navy Major Mary, with her cherry lips wide open enough to fit an apple, stared with wide eyes, unable to recover her wits for a long time. It was as if her expression was frozen in that moment forever. It wasn't until Rain was flying straight from the dock to the stern of the wreck that she came back to her senses, muttering, he has this kind of strength, why doesn't he join the others, and what is he planning to do? The stern. Evelyn, the redhead girl, also widened her eyes quickly, watching Rain's figure as he soared toward the stern of the wreck. However, her mind was rapidly trying to grasp Rain's intentions. The few maneuvers he just executed had already demonstrated that Rain was undoubtedly an expert not inferior to her. But she was still somewhat perplexed as to why Rain was doing this. Why not take the common approach and board the wreck using the gangplank? At this moment, the gangplank of the wreck had not been removed and was still connected to the dock. With his strength, it should have been a breeze for him to barge in. Running to the stern. Could it be, he thought, there would be fewer people if he boarded from the stern? It seemed that was the only explanation. The redhead girl nodded to herself, thinking in secret. Enjoy exclusive adventures from Empire, and the Navy officer standing next to Major Mary, whose strength had reached that of a peak knight, was also looking at Rain with a face full of surprise. A thought instantly crossed his mind. That was that this young man could very likely create an explosive scene for them. Additionally, he murmured softly, "This is definitely not just a knight who has stepped into the transcendent realm for the first time. Not even a seasoned knight's muscle changes can be this exaggerated, could he be?" A bit farther away, a Navy Rear Admiral and the middle-aged man from the examination group both raised their eyebrows, their eyes clearly revealing surprise. Could it be he wants to directly attack the captain's cabin? But the hull thickness of a three-masted sailboat is a full 30 centimeters at least, said the middle-aged man with a mustache, seemingly discerning Rain's goal, speaking quietly. That should be the case. The Navy Rear Admiral nodded, agreeing with the opinion of the mustachioed middle-aged nobleman. Just as everyone on shore was watching to see what Rain would do next. Rain, while descending, perfectly landed both feet and stood firmly on the glimmering greatsword wedged into the hull. Due to his body weight and the force of his high leap, the sword body, which was exceptionally flexible because it was mixed with stardust iron, immediately bent about 30 degrees, like a tightly pulled bow. At that moment, Rain bent his knees in preparation for a jump. Rain's bent knees suddenly straightened with force, combining with the upward elasticity of the sword body. Rain, holding the massive hammer, shot up more than 4 meters high. Strength burst. Simultaneously, his already bulging muscles swelled even more as he swung the massive hammer heavily using unbreakable strength. From bottom to top, spinning 360 degrees with a rotating force, he fiercely hammered toward the location of the small round window in the hefty hull. For there was the captain's resting chamber of the wreck. Rising Dragon Hammer. At this time, inside the captain's resting chamber of the wreck, and was biting into his own finger, dripping blood drop by drop onto a slender water grass. Suddenly, he seemed to catch a fleeting glimpse of a dark shadow passing by the small window at the side of the captain's room. As he looked intently with confusion, suddenly, boom, the thick wooden hull 30 centimeters in front of his desk burst apart with a loud bang. Countless tiny wooden splinters under the impact of a tremendous force scattered in all directions. These pieces of wood of varying sizes and bizarre shapes, with extremely sharp edges, scattered like a storm of high-speed bullets, overwhelming N and the other 2 people in the room. If it was just the shards of the hull, it wouldn't be too much of a concern, as all 3 were at a transcendent level and would only sustain minor external injuries at most. But as the 3 of them raised their hands to block the splinters attacking their eyes, something happened that terrified N to the core. Through the gaps between his fingers, he saw a massive, gleaming dark metallic hammer, along with the flying storm of wood shavings, coming down from above, fiercely targeting his forehead. Earth-splitting hammer. At that very moment, the wizard-apprentice instinct within N overwhelmed the knight instinct. His immediate reaction wasn't to roll and dodge, but to use spiritual power to trigger the life-saving amulet on his chest. This amulet was a one-time instantaneous witchcraft tool that N was loath to use unless it was a critical moment. Just like the sudden storm of wood shavings that had just occurred, he had not been willing to use it. With a scream from N, the amulet on his chest burst open, and at the same time, a water-blue film instantly enveloped him. With the protection of this shield-like film, and no longer panicked at the incoming hammer, his terrified expression calming down a lot. The sharp end of the black massive hammer, full of dense black spikes, hit the water-blue film forcefully, immediately denting it significantly. Then, to N's disbelief, the longest and thickest of those spikes actually pierced straight through his water film shield. Although only a little bit was pierced through, the black spike carried a violent shock force as it embedded about 2 centimeters into his forehead. At this moment, Marla's light blue water membrane shield, possibly due to being punctured, burst like a bubble with a pop, completely shattering. Rain maintained his posture with both hands gripping the hammer as he had just delivered an earth-splitting hammer strike downwards. Marla stood stiffly on the spot, his palm still open with fingers spread, guarding in front of his eyes, in a defensive manner. His facial expression was one of relief as if he had just released the life-saving water membrane shield. Boom! Just then, the back of Marla's head, directly opposite where the forehead was pierced, suddenly exploded. Blood and white brain matter splattered everywhere. Instantly, his head was hollowed out, because the back of Marla's head had been completely blown off, but his face still remained intact. This gave people an illusion that from the front, Marla still bore an expression of relief on his face, as if he were still alive. The next second, his body twitched twice, and he fell heavily to the ground. At this time, the first mate and boatswain had just put down their arms that had been shielding them from flying wood chips. They both looked at the scene before them in utter shock. Eyes bulging, mouths agape. The scene had happened too quickly. They had no time to react, but as the storm of splintered wood cleared, they were immediately confronted with a terrifying sight. Their boss had just died like that. They, specializing in divination and water witchcraft, with strong self-defense capabilities, Marla, their boss, just died like that. This suddenly gave them an absurd feeling, as if Marla had done nothing, just stood there and let the enemy hammer him to death. But obviously that couldn't be. A cornered rabbit will even bite, let alone their boss. Because the last time, when Rain was in triple stack state, a giant hammer strike with a 261% strength amplification almost broke Adam's black membrane shield at the time. That's why he chose such a fierce approach this time. This time, with Rain's strength further enhanced, reaching a 273% strength amplification, along with the hammer technique secret skill Earth-splitting hammer, he finally achieved a shield-breaking strike. After killing the diviner Marla with a hammer strike, Rain, to avoid exhausting his strength, immediately cancelled Strength Burst but retained Limit Break and the transcendent trait Huge Strength LV3. As a result, his entire stature quickly shrank. Although Rain's constitution had improved quite a bit, with his Limit Break value increased. Deploying Limit Break, the transcendent trait Huge Strength, and a full 100% strength burst in such a triple-stacked state, his explosive power was further enhanced. So, the strain on his body was still not minimal, but compared to the previous muscle-tearing aftereffect, it had obviously improved quite a lot. However, to others, it seemed like after killing Marla, Rain was in a weakened state after a burst of secret techniques. Immediately, the two inside the captain's cabin came to their senses and roared furiously. "He killed Boss Marla. Men, you're dead. Quick, get someone here." There was no need for them to yell. Such a commotion in the captain's cabin had already prompted the Bloodsail pirates on guard nearby to rush in. Only to be confronted with the sight of their boss's head hollowed out, they could not help but turn pale. "Kill him!" The Bloodsail pirates were enraged. No matter what, Rain was only one man while they were an entire ship's crew. Amidst the clamorous shouts, many fearless Bloodsail pirates immediately charged at Rain, brandishing various weapons. Enjoy new stories from Empire. However, as they approached Rain, they suddenly felt an intense heat, as if they were sprayed face first with steam at 80 or 90 degrees Celsius. Instantly, many weaker Bloodsail pirate lackeys screamed, trying to push themselves backwards in retreat. But they forgot they were in the captain's cabin, a confined space that was not particularly spacious, yet so many of them had poured in. Although there was no stampede, the idea of retreat was simply wishful thinking. Ah! One after another, the lackeys too weak to withstand the heat screamed as they covered their faces. In just a few seconds, many people's skin had been scalded by Rain's high-temperature force field. Turning from bright red to starting to whiten, this was a sign of almost being cooked. Few who were too forceful in clutching their faces tore the epidermis from their faces, revealing the bloody underlying flesh. The surrounding Bloodsail pirates witnessed this eerie spectacle, and for a moment none dared step forward. But soon, from the continuously arriving Bloodsail pirates, several raised their brand-new matchlock guns, already lit. Rain narrowed his eyes. Although he had the transcendent trait Iron Skin, LV3, and did not fear such low-caliber bullet attacks, he had no need to have a showdown with the enemies here. He would stick to the plan he had set before, thought Rain. The next second, Rain used the weighty pig-head hammer to heavily strike the floor, breaking a large hole in the deck of the captain's room, and he immediately jumped down to the next deck. Compared to the hull, the thickness of this deck was much thinner, making it much easier to shatter. The Bloodsail pirates, like a pack of hyenas, led by the burly first mate and the bearded bosun, pursued Rain relentlessly. But just as they jumped down and some more Bloodsail pirates were rounding to the next lower deck, they saw Rain once again striking the deck. He quickly jumped into the hole in the deck, reaching the very bottom layer. This left the first mate and the bosun from the wreck momentarily dumbfounded. They had never seen an assassin who, after completing the assassination, did not rush to escape, but instead continued to penetrate deeper into enemy territory. The mysterious actions of the enemy were completely incomprehensible. At this moment, because of Rain's layer-by-layer destruction of the deck, he had nearly mobilized all the Bloodsail pirates aboard the wreck. So, nearly 200 Bloodsail pirates began to rush toward the position where Rain was now. This instilled tremendous confidence in the burly first mate and the bearded bosun. Even if you are the great knight, you're done for this time. A single piss each could drown you, by the dockside. What is this nonsense? Even if he could shatter the hull, launching a solo attack is bound to face an ambush by the Bloodsail pirates, truly a stupid act. The male naval officer standing next to Marine Corps Major Merry exclaimed in astonishment, then scolded angrily. His long military experience had taught him to value perfect coordination and tight cooperation. He deeply detested this kind of individual heroism. Furthermore, as a peak knight himself, when he first saw Rain shatter the thick hull of the wreck and break into the captain's quarters with a single blow, he was initially taken aback by Rain's strength, but this was immediately followed by a deep frown. Because no matter how strong one's personal ability, human strength always has its limits. Facing more than 10, or even dozens of Bloodsail pirates single-handedly was clearly unwise. But compelled by duty, the naval officer of peak knight rank immediately tapped his foot on the ground and quickly chased toward the large hole in the wreck. He probably wouldn't make it in time, but he might at least recover the body, he thought. At this time, the beautiful Marine Corps Major Merry finally recovered from the shock of seeing Rain shatter the thick hull. She closed her cherry lips and followed the naval officer, hurrying after him. As one of the record keepers for this knighting examination, she naturally had to keep up, or how could she document the first-hand situation? Following her, 2 naval officers and 1 person dressed in noble hunting attire from the assessment team immediately followed. Read the latest on Empire. These 3 individuals moved rapidly and efficiently, with every action showing signs of high-level expertise, appearing to be peak knights themselves. The blow that Rain struck to shatter the hull of the wreck also caught the eyes of the naval commodore and the nobleman with a handlebar mustache on the beach. Strangely, the 2 remained motionless, appearing completely unconcerned for Rain's safety. The naval commodore watched Rain charge into the captain's quarters, and after several seconds, he turned with a smile to the man with the handlebar mustache and asked, "Sir Theo, having overseen so many knighting assessments, have you ever encountered such an interesting young man?" The handlebar mustachioed middle-aged man, also looking pleased, pondered briefly before replying, "General Zilva, it must have been 3 years since I last saw such a spirited young person." The knighting examiner named Theo used the word spirited, which was quite telling. Naval Commodore Zilva, clearly understanding the implication, smiled and continued, "Indeed, there are many talented young people but few as spirited as this one. So Theo, I might have to trouble you with something." "Oh." Theo raised an eyebrow, eagerly awaiting Zilva's next words. After all, the opportunity to earn a favor from one of the young representatives of the Imperial Navy Commodore Zilva was not easy to come by. In the blink of an eye, Rain had reached the bottom of the shipwreck, where his glimmering greatsword was inserted. At this moment, he could see a short section of the gleaming greatsword's tip penetrating the thick hull, appearing to his right. However, coming to the bottom hold wasn't just about retrieving his greatsword. More importantly, it was about implementing the plan. For this level also housed the storage location for the shipwreck's gunpowder barrels. In front of his eyes, inside a separate small cabin, dozens of large wooden barrels were neatly stacked on metal racks, which seemed to be raised off the ground slightly to prevent dampness. Rain first forcefully withdrew the greatsword and then switched from the hammer in his hand back to the glimmering greatsword. At that moment, a large group of Bloodsail pirates, led by the brutally faced first mate and a bearded sailing master, surrounded him from all directions. Rain assessed his own physical exhaustion. The recent continuous bursts of energy were indeed very draining, so in his mind, he silently opted to allocate more points. Following the pre-planned allocation strategy, as his remaining attribute points changed from 3 right arrow 2 and his spiritual power from 23 points right arrow 24 points, Rain suddenly felt a surge of warmth pumping out of his heart and rapidly spreading to his limbs. In an instant, Rain had restored his physical strength to peak condition. In terms of endurance battles, Rain, who could restore with points allocation, had never feared anyone. The sight of Rain calmly holding the greatsword intimidated the group of Bloodsail pirates momentarily, causing them to shrink back in awe. This infuriated several pirate leaders who had not witnessed Rain's prowess before. "Attack! Kill him!" bellowed a few of the Bloodsail pirate leaders as they led the charge. As the pirates roared, they launched another assault on Rain. Rain's body once again swelled, most noticeably his bulging neck, as if his chest housed a boiling, bubbling pot of water, and his wide-open mouth was like a roaring steam whistle, releasing a colossal stream of heat. Roar! A roar louder than all their voices combined emanated from the bottom hold. Roaring strike, this made every pirate there change their expression, thinking to themselves, "This is bad," but it was already too late to retreat. First, there was this wide-range sonic attack, which was most difficult to counter unless your speed of retreat could surpass the speed of sound. Moreover, being in a cabin, a confined space, the lethality of the sonic waves was further enhanced by the echo. Thus, a moment later, a loud noise exploded by the ears of all the pirates. Dozens of Bloodsail pirates' facial skin stretched, trembled, and distorted under the impact of the sonic waves. Their eyes lost focus and even rolled back, and their heads went blank. "Ah!" screams echoed continuously. And after the loud noise, there was a buzzing noise in their ears and brains that lasted a long time without subsiding. Unlike before, this time Rain did not immediately unleash the whirlwind slash, but instead took this opportunity to cast the witchcraft blaze of light. As a glaring flame suddenly lit up above the palm of Rain's left hand, the previously dim environment was brightly lit like daylight in an instant. Now those Bloodsail pirates were indeed miserable, their eardrums torn, heads throbbing with severe pain. Just as they were starting to recover, they were almost blinded by the intense light, seeing only a sea of whiteness. The shift from extreme darkness to extreme light is unbearable for anyone. Thus, just as the screaming had subsided slightly, it rose again sharply. Seconds later, when the Bloodsail pirates realized they could barely see again, they saw that intensive light moving towards a pile of cylindrical objects at the bottom of the hold. The first mate and sailing master, the first to recover their sight, saw Rain plug and light a fuse on a barrel of gunpowder, their expressions struck with horror. SSSS, the burning sound of the fuse as relentless as a death sentence. Judging by the length of the fuse, it was probably going to explode in 3 seconds. "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" Even faster, the first mate and sailing master immediately abandoned all caution, scrambling to the upper deck. They were well aware that if that pile of gunpowder barrels exploded, not only would they be sent to heaven, but the shipwreck itself would likely also be blasted in two. Just imagining that scene filled both with sheer terror. What kind of maniac has come from where to kill himself and choose mutual destruction? The two cursed in their minds, panicking as they ran for their lives. Run! Ordinary pirates also caught on at this time, and it was not feasible to push through this formidable opponent to extinguish the fuse. The only option now was to run. As long as they could make it to the decks at either end, even if there was an explosion, they might still have a chance to survive. Boom! Just as the Bloodsail pirates scattered chaotically, squeezing toward the ladder of the upper chamber like headless flies. Rain's physique swelled once more. The 2.2-meter muscle behemoth reappeared, instantly switching weapons, and with one hammer blow created another large hole in the 30-centimeter thick oak hull. Then Rain forcefully pushed off with his legs, leaping through the large hole, his entire body soaring like a giant bird towards the nearest small boat over 10 meters away. It had been breaking in before, but now it was breaking out 2 seconds. At that moment, mid-leap Rain suddenly caught sight of a familiar, beautiful face peeking out from the hole in the captain's quarters at the stern of the shipwreck. This couldn't help but make Rain's pupils constrict, and his face changed drastically as a thought flashed through his mind: how is she there? But without time to ponder the reason, he quickly shouted, "Run! The ship is going to explode!" While shouting, Rain swung his arms heavily twice. It turned out, just moments ago, Navy Lieutenant Mary, following a male Navy officer, had entered the wreckage captain's rest chamber through the hole Rain had smashed. Upon entering the captain's chamber, they were shocked to see the wreckage captain and the diviner, Mullah Nasser, lying on the floor. They stared dumbfounded at this scene, completely unable to comprehend what kind of attack would cause such an effect where the back of the head was hollowed out. yet the face remained intact. Dual-handed hammer. If you smash with a hammer, wouldn't the face be a mess too? Dual-handed greatsword. Shouldn't that have either decapitated or split the person in two? Mary, shocked, then picked up a quill and hurriedly wrote, "Participant Rain killed the bloodthirsty pirate wreckage captain and diviner Mala Nasser." But before she could finish writing, suddenly, they felt the ship violently tremble as if another large hole had been struck. Thus, they immediately stuck their heads out to see Rain escaping from the hull at high speed, shouting, "The ship is going to explode." The color drained from everyone's faces. Although they didn't understand how the ship was going to explode, they didn't dare to stay a moment longer. This newly appointed knight, participating in the knighthood examination, had already shocked them too much. It was highly likely he was telling the truth. They had to run first. So, everyone also quickly scrambled out of the hole in the captain's chamber and jumped onto nearby boats, each leaping like a large bird over the sea surface. 1 second. Compared to the bloodthirsty pirates stumbling and trampling each other in the cramped cabin and wooden stairs, the Imperial Navy officers were very lucky, covering 10 or 20 meters in the same time frame. Your journey continues at Empire, facing the threat of death. Every pirate scrambled frantically. Finally, as the explosion arrived, most of the pirates had barely managed to climb a few stair steps. Boom, an explosion that shook the entire Maritet Island suddenly erupted. Including Rain, everyone was hit by the shockwave from behind, stumbling and nearly falling, followed by a shower of water dozens of meters high that drenched them all. They were all in such a disheveled state, one could only imagine the situation of the bloodthirsty pirates on the wreckage. Turning their heads, they saw the 30-meter-long wreckage split in two, ablaze with fierce flames and beginning to slowly sink. But since the wreckage was docked at the pier near the shore, the water was not deep, which caused both halves of the ship's body to protrude high out of the water, standing like giant reefs. On the dock outside, Navy Admiral Zilva was about to say something. Suddenly, a furious roar came from the direction of the wreckage, like the tangible roar of a giant bear. This made Admiral Zilva and the noble middle-aged man Theo stop their conversation and look toward the wreckage once more. They saw the middle-bottom part of the wreckage suddenly explode open, and a familiar figure was quickly running out. The speed didn't look like a retreat, but rather an escape. Is he being overwhelmed and fleeing? On seeing this, the thought popped into both their minds. However, upon hearing Rain's loud exclamation that the ship is going to explode, the two high-ranking officials exchanged a look, both seeing shock in the other's eyes. "It's going to explode." He blew up the wreckage. As the two officials were stunned, a terrifying explosion roared through the docks. The two raised their hands to block the fierce airflow caused by the shock wave. Even at a distance of over 100 meters, the violent airflow still made their clothes flutter loudly. What on earth did this young man do? Didn't they say on the way here that killing a pirate's ship's first mate was already considered an excellent evaluation? The hell is blowing up a whole ship of bloodthirsty pirates, the two thought. Yet both being seasoned in major events, Navy Admiral Zilva quickly recovered and said to the noble middle-aged man, "This kid not only disrupted my earlier plans, but he also destroyed a 3-masted warship we were about to capture." Yes, but what he did, upon closer inspection, didn't violate any assessment regulations, the middle-aged nobleman Theo said with a resigned smile. Who could have expected a knight participating in a knighthood examination, when dealing with pirates, to be fiercer than an experienced naval special forces team? He really stirs up trouble, this kid. Plus, we might have to get busy. Navy Admiral Zilva once more focused his gaze on the bloodsail. Possibly influenced by the wreckage being blown in half, the activities on the bloodsail markedly increased at that moment. Both men, one after the other, charged towards the pirate flagship, the bloodsail. Everyone on the pirate ships, including the bloodsail, whether they were pirates, elite Imperial Navy, or knights participating in the knighthood examination, was shaken by the tremendous sound. On the Rule, led by a previously mentioned noble scion, a group of young knights was battling on the deck with curved sword-wielding bloodthirsty pirates. With many people involved, as they boarded the fuel, it was inevitable that they would be discovered sooner or later. Thus, after a period of stealth attacks, the conflict eventually escalated into a full-blown battle. As the explosive sounds from the wreck rang out, everyone watched the fiercely burning and broken 3-masted ship in awe of the Empire's naval grandiosity, instantly boosting everyone's morale. The same scene was unfolding on the Hook, enjoy new adventures from Empire on the Bloodsail. Being the flagship of the Bloodsail pirates, the pirates' strength was not to be underestimated. They were fiercely battling with the Empire's naval assault team, which was why Commodore Zilva had mentioned he would be busy for a while. At that moment, Rain, who had caused such a commotion, stood calmly, seemingly admiring his own masterpiece. But in reality, he was just checking the system notifications. Skill high temperature field has been improved. Experience plus 17, your skill giant bear sword technique has been improved. Experience plus 54, your skill tackle hammer technique has been improved. Experience plus 377, your skill blazing light has been improved. Experience plus 19, you have undergone a battle, knight, transcendent. Experience plus 81, wizard apprentice, transcendent. Experience plus 46. At this moment, Colonel Mary, stepping with a clack 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 in her thick-heeled boots, quickly approached Rain and said somewhat angrily, "Knight Rain, why did you tell us before you made such a big commotion? Just now, we almost." Rain turned his head and glanced at the drenched beauty of the colonel. Her shapely naval uniform was clinging tightly to her body, accentuating her voluptuous figure. A pity that her pretty face was glaring at him with its beautiful eyes. However, Rain somewhat understood her feelings, as anyone would be furious if they nearly died at the hands of friendly fire. As for Mary, who always cared about her appearance, not only was she drenched by the explosion of the wreck, but drops of salty sea water were still trickling down her beautiful thick hair. That was indeed too much for someone who always loved cleanliness. Indeed, I was negligent, he said. However, it doesn't say in the guidelines that new knights taking the assessment need to report their action plans in advance, does it? Rain felt it necessary to explain clearly. After all, had he not alerted his allies in time, it could have resulted in casualties on their side, so he added another sentence. You. Mary's bosom heaved as Rain's words resonated with her, but upon careful thought, she actually couldn't find any flaw in what Rain had said, because indeed the assessment rules never stated that new knights must report their action plans. Then you tell me, how should I record and tally your kills? Mary sharply turned the conversation, pointing to the Bloodsail pirates still alive in the sea and the many more bodies drifting with the waves. Rain grumbled internally, "You're the recorder, isn't that for you to figure out?" While he soothingly said, "Colonel Mary, just record the captain, first mate, and boatswain of the wreck, let's not bother about the others." "No. As the recorder, I have to document everything clearly." "Then I really don't have any good solution." Long before Rain saw the blueprint of the three-masted ship, he had considered this battle plan. At that time, he had studied the data on the ship's hull thickness, deck thickness, and more several times. On the other hand, near the campfire on the beach, he also found the thick oak planks the pirates used for repairing their hulls and personally tested their strength. After ensuring all conditions were met, Rain finally decided to implement this battle strategy. His goal was simple: to kill as many Bloodsail pirates as possible and thus secure a high evaluation. After all, a mere excellent rating wasn't Rain's goal. Receiving an invite to become a sword-bearer was. The reason Rain didn't choose the Bloodsail was that it was also the main attack direction of the naval assault team. Obviously, if the underlings were also counted, it wouldn't compare to potentially capturing the wreck in one fell swoop. Moreover, on the Bloodsail, there was also a great knight-level expert, Bloody Hand Willie. Rain thought challenging him with a leap slash was too risky from any perspective. Even though, now with the strength of a level 2 wizard apprentice, his total combat power exceeded that of a peak knight. But compared to a great knight, Rain estimated there was still a significant gap. As for how much of a gap, he really wasn't sure, because he had never crossed swords with an enemy of the great knight level. Lastly, another critical point was the mysterious messenger from the Eagle Federation. What exactly was their strength? The Imperial Navy's provided information didn't specify, and the Navy Commodore hadn't mentioned it either. Unknowns are the biggest uncontrollables and sources of risk. However, choosing the wreck essentially eliminated those issues. Looking back now, Rain thought his decision was quite wise. At that moment, Rain suddenly remembered something. He seemed to have forgotten to pick up the spoils of war, especially those of the wreck captain and diviner, Mala Nasser. As a wizard apprentice, there might be other witchcraft models on him, or some other items of interest to Rain, but he wasn't particularly concerned about the spoils of others. Fortunately, shipwreck had split into two, but it had broken in the middle. Both ends, the stern and the bow, were now standing at a 45-degree angle towards the sky and had not sunk into the water. Rain immediately turned his head and asked, "Major Mary, is the loot from the knighthood assessment considered personal property, or does it belong to the Empire?" Ah, Mary, who was still fuming, did not expect Rain to suddenly ask such a question out of the blue. After thinking for a moment, she responded, "It's personal property, of course, unless it involves something related to national security of the Empire. Then it must be turned over." Rain nodded. "Thank you, Major Mary. I think I need to go find my loot. Would you like to come with me?" Sure." Mary was taken aback but quickly nodded in agreement. Indeed, diverting attention is a good way to stop a woman from nagging you. Rain had often used it on his mother, Emma. Now it seemed this was a universal skill. Shipwreck's captain's quarters. Although it was Mary's second time seeing the diviner's body, she couldn't help but exclaim, "Knight Rain, how on earth did you?" While speaking, Mary pointed to the empty skull of the deceased. "Just a secret technique. By the way, I should have no problem getting an excellent evaluation for the assessment, right?" Rain didn't wish to elaborate on his methods and used diversion of attention once again. "Of course, in my opinion, you deserve a higher level of evaluation. Unfortunately, the highest grade in the knighthood assessment is excellent," Major Mary said with a slight smile. "Bloodsails, stern deck." Baron Zilva's face was livid as he gazed at a ripple quickly moving away hundreds of meters out at sea. He knew beneath the surface was a newly developed device from the Eagle Federation, capable of short-duration underwater navigation. It seemed that his ship stationed at the open sea would probably not be able to stop the Federation's approach. The raid had not been fully successful, a pity indeed. However, looking at Bloody Hand, Willie sprawled beside him. Like a mud doll, Baron Zilva's complexion finally improved a bit. At least he should be able to extract some useful information from Willie's mouth. "Report, General, we found a batch of new matchlock guns. Judging from the material and craftsmanship, they are likely from the Eagle Federation," a messenger reported. Zilva nodded without saying much. Meanwhile, the battle on Maritet Island was gradually reaching its end. And the task of compiling statistics was being rushed through overtime. Especially on Shipwreck's side, Major Mary had to ask her colleagues for help to fish out the floating corpses and the half-dead Bloodsail pirates. The male naval officer was directing the assault team. Members originally meant to attack Shipwreck in clearing the surface of the sea. Rain was quite lucky. The first mate with the full face of flesh and the bearded boatswain were both fished out. The veteran knight's robust bodies allowed them to survive, having avoided the center of the explosion. However, heavily injured as they were, they did not escape the Empire's Navy search and were captured on the spot. According to the statistics rules of the knighthood assessment, it had to be either witnessed by a recorder or corroborated with distinctive items or corpses. Now, the three giants of Shipwreck had all been accounted for and recorded under Rain's kill list. An hour later, the new knights participating in the assessment were gathered once again and boarded the Navy warship heading back. Unlike on the way there, this time they were on a large 4-masted sailing ship of the Imperial Navy. Inside the cabin, some could not hide their joy, while others were downcast. "This time I killed 6 Bloodsail pirate leaders and got a good evaluation. I should have no problem. Alas, I only killed 11 common pirates. I'm afraid I might not make it this time," a young man said, unable to hide his disappointment. "That's what happens when you choose Little Fortress. It's safe, but there are much fewer pirates inside than on a ship, and too many of you went there." "Not surprised by your outcome," said another slightly older young man with a hint of disdain. "Many people are always like that, wanting big rewards without taking any risks." He had gone to Hook's Might, killing 7 Bloodsail pirate leaders and 8 common pirates, securing a good evaluation for himself. "Did you hear? The red-haired girl Evelyn killed the boatswain of Bloodsail and several pirate leaders. That fierce, doesn't that mean she's definitely getting an excellent evaluation? Tusk, that's a direct barony title right there, so envious." "Yeah, many knights serve decades for the Empire and only end up with a barony," said another young man enviously, glancing sideways at the red-haired girl. However, what puzzled him was that the red-haired girl Evelyn's eyes kept darting to a black-haired young man beside her. Although the ship named Sunken Vessel exploded in two, all the newly knighted participants of the knighthood exam had heard and seen it. However, apart from the red-haired girl Evelyn, who had witnessed that Ren was responsible for it, everyone else had only heard the loud explosion and seen the sunken vessel burning and breaking in two. Therefore, they naturally assumed it was the work of the Imperial Navy, never even considering that it could have been one of the young participants in the knighthood examination. On the other hand, perhaps due to rules concerning confidentiality, the exam committee members and Navy officials who had witnessed Wren blowing up the ship kept completely silent about the situation at the time. As for Evelyn, the only other eyewitness, she was reserved and a bit proud, and she had no desire to spread the news. Thus, one thing led to another, and none of the youths knew that Wren was behind the explosion of the ship. As for Wren himself, he naturally wouldn't go around proclaiming his deed. At this moment, Wren was quietly sitting in a cabin chair, replaying the entire battle in his mind, as if the noisy sounds within the ship had nothing to do with him. If during that time, the Diviner Mala's protective film had resisted his earth-splitting hammer, then the experienced knights, the first mate and the bosun of the sunken vessel would have surely joined the fight. But since he had released a high-temperature field that lasted about a minute ahead of time, and the fight took place in a closed and small captain's quarters, he still maintained a significant advantage. Defeating those few was just a matter of exerting himself a bit more. The only scenario in which he might have failed was if the Diviner Mala had chosen to flee right after resisting his hit. Then, relying on his familiarity with the sunken vessel, Mala might have escaped immediately, and Wren would have been too slow to catch up, all while being fatigued from killing off the Bloodsail footmen along the way. In that case, there would have been many variables. Even if he ultimately managed to destroy the sunken vessel, the Diviner Mala would have certainly escaped, and his achievements in battle would be significantly diminished. However, upon further reflection, Wren realized that this possibility was not very high. After all, the sunken vessel was Diviner Mala's lair. He had many treasures stored in the captain's quarters, and also he had never confronted Wren directly before. Putting himself in his shoes, he wasn't likely to just give up his treasured possessions and quickly flee from his lair upon an encounter. Speaking of treasured possessions, Wren couldn't help but glance down at the black cloth bag at his feet, which contained the spoils from Diviner Mala. Inside the black cloth bag was just a small iron box. At that time, Wren had considered that carrying just a small iron box would be too conspicuous, so he found a black bag to cover it. This way, it appeared less conspicuous. Because many newly knighted participants had their gains in similarly large and small black bags during the knighting exam. In the small box found under the bed of the captain's quarters of the sunken vessel, the first thing inside was a fish scale scroll documenting a water-related witchcraft called hydrotherapy. Combining this with the information previously given by the Imperial Navy, Wren guessed it was likely Diviner Mala's signature water witchcraft. If it were another wizard apprentice, they would likely be thrilled to obtain an opponent's signature spell. However, Wren felt slightly disappointed since it was not the best-suited fire witchcraft for him. For him, the shortage of witchcraft to learn wasn't an issue. He had yet to study 2 curses from Adam, and now he had acquired hydrotherapy. He could study these witchcrafts, but in terms of power or effectiveness, there would be considerable discounts otherwise. The concept of affinity wouldn't exist. Secondly, there was a letter inside Mala's iron box. The letter itself was not important, it was a letter Mala wrote to a friend, but it mentioned a piece of information. Regarding this information, Wren considered its value no less than the just obtained water witchcraft hydrotherapy, because the letter mentioned a mysterious market in Rosby City called the Nightingale Market. This immediately reminded Wren of Meister's Bat Market. Perhaps in the mysterious market in Rosby City, Wren could encounter something useful to him. Last, there was something interesting inside the small iron box. It was half of a treasure map. Upon seeing this, Wren couldn't help but laugh. He hadn't set out on a great voyage yet, but he had already come across a treasure map. Originally, Wren wasn't very interested in treasure maps because the gold and silver treasures hidden by the pirates weren't a great temptation to him. However, after seeing the notes written by Malo on the back of the treasure map, he changed his mind. Because it was the treasure of the Pirate King. The origin of this treasure map, after Mala's long-term and meticulous investigation, was discovered to come from a pirate king named Vincent Sanborn, a fire witchcraft wizard and a great knight. Active hundreds of years ago, who was renowned for his fireball technique comparable to heavy artillery. It's said that the power of a single fireball technique is even stronger than a 32-pound cannon. Especially when the target is those wooden-hulled ships, one fireball not only shatters the hull but also ignites the body of the ship. so Vincent Sanborn easily ascended to the throne of the Pirate King, known by the nickname Shipburner. Fireball technique, Rain couldn't help but long for it. Although there is currently no clue about the other half of the treasure map, he already has one half after all. What if one day he could find the other half? Once he learns the witchcraft fireball technique, he would definitely add 5 skill points. 3 would simply not do the word fireball justice. Half a day later, after a night of battle and tense statistics, the naval officers who participated in the assault on Maritet Island and the Imperial Ennobling Evaluation Team members were holding a joint meeting in the conference room of the Imperial South Sea Fleet's 6th Division, across from the Navy House Inn. A crisp female voice was reporting data clearly. The other party was a female officer dressed in a Navy uniform, just like Major Mary, except her shoulder bore 3 stars, indicating she was a captain. Felipe Kerbin killed the Lihook's first mate, 3 Bloodsail pirate leaders and 8 common pirates, scoring 400 points. Bridget Sanchez killed the Lihook's captain. Bilkul Jamal, 5 Bloodsail pirate leaders and 3 common pirates, scoring 615 points. Upon hearing this, many in the meeting room whispered, "Hiss, if it weren't for that Rain, this one would have been the top scorer in this ennobling evaluation, right?" Right, if it hadn't been for Rain who blew up the ships, this one would have been first. This score in the previous 2 evaluations would have been confidently first. It's hard to imagine that now it can only settle for second. A member of the evaluation team dressed in noble hunting attire murmured. Rain Carlin killed the Rex captain Mullah Nasser. The first mate, the boatswain, 22 Bloodsail pirate leaders, 149 common pirates. The female captain paused upon reaching this point, then continued, score, 2,285 points. Perhaps because of this score, the female captain's final tone was much more excited than before. Hiss, inside the meeting room, many couldn't help but gasp. Tusk, tusk, many others made sounds of amazement and surprise. Although the event of ship blowing had almost spread among the naval officers and the evaluation team at the scene last night. At that time, many had guessed that the newcomer Shipburner Knight would receive an extremely high score. But now, upon actually hearing such an exaggerated score of over 2,000 points, they were still left flabbergasted. Not only because this score had left the second place more than 3 times behind, but also because you should know that the current second place score in previous ennoblement evaluations would have been securely the first as well. This left everyone in awe. When was the last time such a preposterous score appeared in the ennoblement evaluation? Viscount Theo, dressed in noble hunting attire, couldn't help but fall into reminiscence. This situation, even in the memory of this officer, who had been in charge of the ennoblement evaluations for 5 years, seemed to have never occurred. Even considering the records of all previous Minster Province ennoblement evaluations, such an exaggerated score had not appeared in a very long time. "Ladies and gentlemen, the score report is complete," the female captain declared firmly. "Very well, now that everyone has heard the statistics, do any of the reviewers have objections?" Vice Admiral Zilva said with a smile, nodding at the female captain to signal that she could sit down. "No objections." "None." As Zilva's gaze shifted to each reviewer, they each responded in turn. At this moment, a male naval officer serving as a reviewer furrowed his brow and raised a different opinion. "This, concerning Rain's score, I have a question. His ship-blowing action, to some extent, disrupted the Imperial Navy's attack on the Bloodsail pirates' flagship, the Bloodsail. Therefore, I think there is a problem with his actions, and it would be more appropriate to deduct some points." No sooner had the officer finished speaking than some people nodded slightly and began whispering among themselves. It seems there is a certain rationale to it. Rain's act of blowing up ships did have elements of taking advantage, indeed. Some points should be deducted. Correct, he is strong but not strong enough to leave second place so far behind. "I object." At that moment, a voice sweet as an aureole spoke up, as the svelte figure of a female naval officer stood, none other than Major Mary. Under everyone's gaze, she spoke confidently. "I believe that we must first clarify something. Do the participants of the ennoblement evaluation need to pre-report their individual plans of action? I think this point has not been required, neither in the notices nor during the operations on site. As such, from the perspective of the participants, making maximum use of existing conditions to increase the kill count is not inappropriate." In any way, as she spoke, Mary looked around the room, catching everyone's eyes. Many people thought it over, then nodded, seeming to agree. Indeed, it was so. Seeing this scene, Mary revealed a slight smile and continued. Moreover, Knight Rain was able to combine the information from the records with the actual situation on site and implement it effectively. I think this point is key to his scoring far above others. Hearing this, Admiral Zilva of the Imperial Navy also looked at Mary with admiration. Because this was also the reason he held Rain in high regard. Apart from Rain's own formidable strength, the ability to grasp the crux of a problem and execute a response swiftly was extremely important. And to find a young person with both aforementioned abilities was rare even within the whole Imperial Navy. And within the 6th Squadron of the Southern Sea Fleet, it was even rarer. Seeing that no one else had opinions to offer, Admiral Zilva turned to Viscount Theo and said, "Viscount, as the person in charge of the ennoblement assessment, the decision is yours to make." Viscount Theo nodded with a smile and said, "Admiral Zilva, you are too courteous. I personally see no issue with Rain's current score. However, according to our protocols, we need to take a vote. Of course, this is a necessary procedure. Now, please, those in favor of Rain's current score, raise your hand," Zilva said with a smile and raised his own right hand. Viscount Theo, next to him, naturally raised his right hand as well. Seeing that the two influential figures at the scene had reached an agreement, who else would not know what to do? Immediately, hands shot up, and the male naval officer's mouth twitched slightly before he also raised his own right hand. Passed unanimously. After the people in the conference room dispersed, Admiral Zilva said to Viscount Theo with a smile, "Lord Viscount, do you remember last night when I mentioned I needed a favor from you?" "Of course, Admiral Zilva, go ahead," Theo responded with a smile. "I've reviewed Rain's record, and I did not expect such a talented young man of the Empire, who has such strength, is currently just a minor deputy officer of the peace in Flashgold Town. It's quite the waste. Viscount, what do you think about allowing me to jump the queue and deliver the transfer orders to Rain? At the same time as the assessment results are delivered, I think such a spirited young man should serve in the Imperial Navy. It would be a heinous waste otherwise." Viscount Theo listened and smiled gently. He had vaguely guessed that the favor Zilva spoke of might have something to do with Rain, and it turned out to be true. Under normal circumstances, after participating in the ennoblement assessment, whether a new knight passes and what kind of title is granted requires about a month's wait for the result. At a slower pace, it might take 2 months, or even longer, because according to regulations, the outcome of the ennoblement assessment should be announced and communicated to the concerned parties within 3 months after the assessment. For Viscount Theo, granting the title in advance was not a problem at all. As long as he reported it to the Imperial Senate, the results could be clarified in as soon as 3 days, and Rain could be granted the title of Baron. Such degree of maneuvering did not violate the Empire's regulations, as it was within the scope of his authority. Therefore, the favor Zilva asked for was naturally doable. "Of course, Admiral Zilva, I agree with your suggestion. For such capable and driven young men, they should indeed be placed in positions suitable for them," Theo said, still smiling. "What does placing them in positions suitable for them mean?" Admiral Zilva scoffed inwardly. Could a normal person even come up with such roundabout talk? Crafty fox. Not long after returning to the home of the Imperial Navy Inn, Rain's room was suddenly met with an urgent knock. Knock, knock, knock. Upon opening the door, Rain saw an elated Has standing there. Has suddenly grabbed Rain's arms and jubilantly said, "Rain, I've passed, ha ha ha." Has, I remember your task was a solo one, but isn't it only after a month that one finds out whether they've passed the assessment?" asked Rain, slightly puzzled. "My assessment required me to kill 5 ink-spewing merfolk, but I managed to kill 6. Those damnable deep-sea merfolk have much stronger combat abilities than ordinary merfolk. Each one was no less formidable than an appointed knight. Also, their cursed ink-spewing ability not only has a potent poison, but also obscures the vision. It's easy to get hit if you're not careful," Has babbled excitedly. But Rain could tell that Has was simply too happy and wanted someone to share his joy with. After talking for a while, Has suddenly remembered something and asked, "Rain, sorry, I forgot to ask you. How did your assessment go? With your skills, you should stand a chance to receive a good evaluation, right?" Has asked earnestly. Because Rain had saved him from that group of men before, Has knew Rain was stronger than him, though he wasn't quite sure by how much. And although he had invited Rain to the training ground several times, Rain had declined. However, he believed that Rain had strength close to that of a seasoned knight. After all, that group had 2 official knights, which an ordinary knight would not be able to contend with. This shouldn't be a problem, I suppose. Rain thought for a moment and nodded. If he outright claimed he should receive an excellent evaluation, Rain felt it would be too pretentious. Additionally, he didn't want to dampen the spirits of this new friendship with his current state of happiness. It's just like you to receive such a high commendation. That's really impressive. Haas slapped Rain on the shoulder admiringly. At that moment, the clomping of boots echoed from one end of the corridor, and the graceful Major Merica, now in a brand new naval uniform, approached Rain. When she arrived in front of the 2 men, Haas's face turned slightly red, and he lowered his head, becoming oddly quiet. Merica turned to Haas and said, "Knight, may I have a word alone with Knight Rain?" Oh, of course." Of course, Haas scratched his head and stumbled over his words. Once Haas had left, Merica said to Rain with a smile, "Knight Rain, I've just been informed by my superiors that you need to stay at the Navy Home Inn for another 3 days. Is that all right?" No problem." Rain hesitated briefly but then quickly agreed. He didn't ask for a reason, because 3 days might just be enough time for him to find that mysterious market, Nightingale Market. Besides, for him, having the opportunity to learn more about the outside world was beneficial, and Rossby City was clearly a place with more information. After all, he had been staying in Flashgold Town and rarely had the chance to learn about external affairs. Seeing Rain agree, Merica's beautiful eyes gazed at him with a peculiar look, and she smiled, saying, "Well done, Knight Rain." With that, Major Merica turned and left. This left Rain a bit confused. Only 5 or 6 hours earlier, the Major had been angrily airing her grievances to him, and now she was offering him praise. But then again, receiving praise felt quite good. Hence, that afternoon, while most of the newly promoted knights, including Haas, began packing their bags to return home, Rain, who had been notified, continued to comfortably settle down. Meanwhile, in a mansion within Meister County City's underground hall, High Priest. After days of investigation, we believe the druid who encountered Lord Giovanni is no longer in Flashgold Town. The Black Flame monk Lamar reported respectfully to the bulky figure seated before him. You mean to say the druid who suddenly appeared was just passing through?" The High Priest's tone was clearly one of surprise. 7 or 8 days earlier, he had been shocked to hear about Giovanni's serious injury. He had not expected a novice knight from a small town to become involved with a druid. If that were the case, it would certainly be worth scrutinizing. Well, I can't be sure. Because Rain also isn't in Flashgold Town at the moment, I can't confirm any connection between the 2 through actions directed towards Rain. Lamar thought carefully before cautiously answering the High Priest's question. "What do you mean?" "High Priest, reliable sources indicate that Rain went to Rossby City a few days ago to participate in the noble title examination. Therefore, it is currently unclear whether there is a connection between Rain and the druid who injured Lord Giovanni. Besides, we have no leads on the origins of that druid," Lamar said, finding himself at a loss for words. Because even to him, the entire response seemed rather perfunctory. But he really did his best. After Giovanni returned severely injured that day, Lamar was assigned the task of investigating the druid. At the time, he was deeply concerned, for if even Giovanni was no match, then he was even less so. Only through several days of discreet investigation did he confirm that the druid was no longer in Flashgold Town. But by that time, he discovered that Rain also seemed to be gone from Flashgold Town. Lamar was comparatively responsible, exhausting all sorts of efforts to inquire through a secret channel before learning the news that Rain might be attending the ennoblement assessment. It happened that he received an order from the High Priest to return and report, which led to the scene today. After listening to Lamar's investigative results, the High Priest did not reply for a long while. Thus, the underground hall fell into a brief and gloomy silence, where Lamar could hear even his own breathing distinctly. The High Priest was speechless internally. This Rain, wasn't he just a newly risen knight? How could it be that, after several encounters, they couldn't deal with him, and instead, there seemed to be a trend of him getting stronger and stronger? This simply defied all logic. The previous installment of the Black Flame prayer had also been missed due to the failed blood sacrifice in Flashgold Town, resulting in a fruitless effort. Right now, preparing for the next installment of the Black Flame prayer ceremony was of the utmost importance. But if this Rain was not taken care of, it would not only be an embarrassment, but who knew if he might once again disrupt the Order's actions. At that moment, the high priest's large and corpulent body shifted slightly in the expansive chair, and he turned his head to look at Lamar, asking, "Just now, you said that this Rain has gone to Rossby City for the ennoblement assessment." "Yes, Your Eminence." Lamar nodded affirmatively without hesitation. "And what do you think? Will he be able to pass the assessment?" Lamar really wanted to say of course, but felt that he shouldn't boost the enemy's morale and undermine his own prestige, so, after carefully choosing his words, he said, "He should be able to, right?" The corpulent high priest didn't mind Lamar's slick use of a questioning tone at the end, but continued, "If he can, then when he returns, it will be time to wait for the awarding of knighthood and his promotion. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Eminence, that is the official procedure according to the Empire." Noticing that the high priest was simply confirming the imperial official process, Lamar spoke with a much lighter tone. "H.M. Lamar, contact Baron Alonso and inform him of this situation. Since Rain has become a noble, let's find a way to have him appointed as the sheriff of Fishing Port Town." As the high priest spoke, a sharp gleam flashed through his small eyes on his chubby face. However, Merrill frowned upon hearing this and said, "Your Eminence, do you intend to use the pirate's hands to deal with him?" "No, it's the Sea God sect." "The Sea God sect? Are they emerging again? Aren't they afraid of another imperial purge?" Lamar asked in a startled and urgent manner. "Yes, after a long period of inactivity, they have begun to make moves. Otherwise, why do you think the pirates were so cooperative with our actions last time? It was the Sea God sect behind them." So that was it. Lamar wore a look of sudden realization. No wonder the timing of the pirates' attacks during previous actions was so well coordinated with the Black Flame Order's activities, diverting a significant portion of Meister County's official imperial attention. At the time, he did not understand how the Black Flame Order could possibly restrain the pirates, only now realizing the High Priest had reached out to the Sea God sect. Everything made sense now. "Lamar, go to Alonso and see to this matter. Afterward, our focus remains on preparing for the Black Flame prayer ceremony." The high priest's deep voice resonated after a long pause. "By your command, Your Eminence, I shall go now." Lamar bowed with his hand on his chest and retreated slowly. Rossby City Navy's home inn. Haz, a tall figure, was bidding farewell to Rain. "Rain, I'm currently residing in Richmond Fishing Port, right next to the Golden Coast. If you travel south from Rossby City, about a 2-day journey will get you there. Remember to come and find me when you have time," he said. "Oh, and boiling giant spine salmon is our local specialty. I'll definitely take you to enjoy it properly when you visit." As he mentioned the boiling giant spine salmon, Haz's Adam's apple visibly bobbed. "I didn't expect this kid to be such a foodie." Rain, however, heard a familiar term, Golden Coast. Master Ganther, the swordsmanship master mentioned by Clea, lived in seclusion on the Golden Coast. Perhaps he did indeed have a chance to meet Haz again in the near future. Rain had been contemplating whether to take advantage of his trip to Rossby City for the assessment to continue southward to the Golden Coast to learn from the swordsmanship master, or to return home first. After thinking it over, Rain decided to return home first, because if he went to study with Master Ganther, it could be a month at the least, several at the most, and not informing his parents in advance would surely cause them worry. Moreover, he was also the deputy sheriff of Flashgold Town, and if he were gone for a month, was at least necessary to notify Hamilton in advance. "All right, Haz, I'll definitely come to look for you when I get the chance," Rain said with a smile as he nodded. "Safe travels." After sending Haz off, Rain began to stroll around Rossby City. On the very day he arrived, he had already explored the area around Navy's home inn, gaining a basic understanding of Rossby City. In terms of scale, Rossby City was almost twice the size of Meister City and also more prosperous, a characteristic of a trading port city. In general, a trade-oriented city situated by the sea, as long as it has unfettered sea navigation and constant trade, will flourish far more than an inland city. Having 3 days, Rain was in no rush. He planned to first explore some bustling alleys or perhaps near some taverns. Just like the Bat Market, the Nightingale Market might also reside in a tranquil spot amidst the commotion. Under the warm winter sun, bursts of relatively warm and moist sea breeze blew, carrying a faint, briny scent. Along the vibrant stands he passed, Rain saw a greater variety of seafood, shell products, and goods from remote islands than he had seen on the busy streets of Meister. After a large loop, Rain surprisingly couldn't find the entrance to the Nightingale Market, which puzzled him a bit, since he had wandered most of the bustling and lively areas of Rossby City throughout the morning. Could it be that the Nightingale Market was located in the opposite direction, perhaps among noble estates or affluent districts? After a short deliberation, Rain felt this possibility wasn't highly likely. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration flashed through Rain's mind. He had an epiphany. There was a place he had possibly been overlooking all this time. That was the docks. Rossby City had several docks, such as the Navy-only dock, fishing docks, and cargo docks, among which there were 2 fishing docks. Thus, Rain began searching each dock. Soon, as Rain reached near the cargo dock, he immediately saw a nightingale emblem not far from a tavern named Sailor's Home. This made Rain's face light up, and he walked over. Similar to the Bat Market, after walking through an illusion array, Rain found himself in a market, still with that familiar scent. People were coming and going, most wearing hoods or even veils, a sign of concealing their movements, although some freely showed their faces, though they were relatively fewer. The market was rather crowded, yet voices were kept low. At that moment, the red-haired girl Evelyn was also in the Nightingale Market, gathering some raw materials for potions. Soon, she noticed that familiar figure. "Hey, what brings him here?" Seeing Rain roaming about, she couldn't help but stop in her tracks. Truthfully, Evelyn was quite curious about Rain, who had executed the ship explosion during the ennoblement assessment. Although she was somewhat introverted and proud by nature, it depended on the person. Being the most powerful among her age in Rossby City's nobility, facing most young talents made a bit of pride and reserve inevitable. But Rain was different. His performance during the ennoblement was incredibly striking, commanding her respect. And with Rain's keen senses, he naturally noticed the girl's gaze. Although she wore a hood, the strand of red hair peeking out, and the familiar bright eyes quickly allowed Rain to recognize her as the red-haired girl Evelyn. Soon their eyes met. Rain smiled slightly at this, which made Evelyn immediately return the smile. After a thought, Evelyn approached and said, "Knight Rain, hello, I am Evelyn. Your performance during the ennoblement was quite astonishing." "You flatter me, Knight Evelyn. Hawes has told me about your strength and beauty. In comparison, I only found a loophole." Evelyn covered her mouth and giggled, saying, "Knight Rain, I thought someone as formidable as you would be busy practicing and not so eloquent, but now I see that is not the case. By the way, Knight Rain, if I may ask boldly, what brings you to the Nightingale Market? Perhaps, as a local, I can be your guide." Evelyn offered. Evelyn also found it strange. Why did her mood suddenly brighten upon hearing Rain's compliment? After all, the young men who flattered her daily weren't less than 10, usually 7 or 8, were inevitable. Moreover, these individuals spoke more straightforwardly and exaggeratedly than Rain, but none gave her the same feeling as he just did. Rain had merely complimented her once, and since it was their first formal conversation, it was mostly polite, yet somehow it made her very happy. Perhaps it was because his strength was substantial enough. Evelyn pondered. Of course, having the beautiful and powerful Knight Evelyn as my guide would absolutely be an honor. Rain promptly responded with a smile. Moreover, he thought about it and saw no point in concealing anything. After all, having come to the Nightingale Market indicated that from some perspective, both he and Evelyn were like-minded individuals. Likely, she was also a wizard apprentice, just uncertain of which specialty. Thus, Rain continued, "I am looking to see if there are any witchcraft models suited for me, but after looking around, it seems there aren't any powerful witchcraft available." Evelyn smiled and replied, "Of course. On a market of this mystical level, you won't find powerful witchcraft or first-grade witchcraft. However, sometimes you might find some decent beginner-level witchcraft." Is there a reason for that?" Rain asked, slightly puzzled. "Because the actual managers behind these markets are a combination of the Empire and some wizard schools. Some items are still restricted." Evelyn explained. "I see." Rain couldn't help but nod. No wonder. He still remembered that last time at the Bat Market, he had taken a big bag of items from Adam's shop and was later stopped by 2 managers of the market. However, after he revealed his identity, he was safely let go. Sure enough, behind these mysterious markets, just as he had guessed, was some kind of management under the Empire. Looking at the red-haired girl Evelyn in front of him, Rain couldn't help but think of Jenny, who was also a noble girl. However, Jenny was of a slightly lower status, and moreover, she was merely a noble lady without any combat skills. But the girl before him, Evelyn, was not only a viscountess, higher in rank than a baron, but her personal strength was also quite remarkable. Rain had a feeling that her strength might not be much weaker than his own. Like him, Evelyn was both a wizard apprentice and a knight, and belonged to those surpassing the strength of a typical peak knight. Then Rain continued to inquire, "So, if one wants to learn powerful witchcraft, what are the ways to do so?" Evelyn looked at Rain with her beautiful eyes and couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh, saying, "Knight Rain, you're really pretending to be ignorant here. What other way could there be? Generally speaking, there are two paths. One is to join an ancient school of wizards. The other is to hold a high enough position within the violent institutions of the empire. If the position is high enough, naturally you can access many secrets, confidential witchcraft, combat skills and research materials, etc. can all be accessible." The two chatted as they browsed, quickly becoming familiar with each other. Evelyn had just realized that Rain was not actually a noble heir, which suddenly made her understand why Rain had asked so many questions that, to her, seemed like common knowledge. But on second thought, she was even more amazed. A commoner's son attaining such a level of strength. Evelyn found that she was unable to see through Rain even more, because she knew that whether as a knight or a wizard apprentice, the path of cultivation required numerous resources. If a commoner's son wanted to reach Rain's current level, it would be extremely difficult. With Evelyn as a guide, who was familiar with Nightingale Market, Rain quickly explored almost every part of the Nightingale Market. Indeed, as Evelyn had said, one could hardly see those powerful witchcraft at the market. However, there were many rare materials, such as the star grass required for another potion, Spirit Potion, noted in Rain's Beast. Taming Diary, which was available for sale here. Spirit Potion. After consumption, it can enhance an animal's spirit. In some places, it is also called Wisdom Potion, which, when fed to animals, will improve their intelligence to a certain extent. This potion requires a primary ingredient, the sea star grass, which grows in the sea and gets its name because it has 5 points like a sea star. Rain, inside a shop, spotted an old book, and from the magical script on the cover, it was titled Witchcraft Notes. There should be a name before those words, but perhaps due to its age or another reason, it was unreadable. Rain thought for a moment and asked, "Hello, may I browse through this book?" "You can see 2 pages." The clerk nodded and handed the book to Rain. After carefully turning through 2 pages, Rain closed the book. Evelyn also glanced over it from the side. Although Rain's face was expressionless, he was quite delighted inside, because the content on the first 2 pages indicated that it was likely a witchcraft notebook documenting fire magic. "How much for this book?" 2,000 imperial gold coins. Rain nodded. The price was fairly acceptable. Just as he was considering buying something else to acquire this book, Evelyn suddenly interjected, "The first 2 pages are indeed official wizard manuscripts, but the material of the remaining pages seems a bit off. If you look closely, there's a subtle difference. I feel this is not a complete piece." After hearing this, the clerk's expression changed, but he simply forced a smile and said nothing. Rain instantly understood what had happened and immediately left the store with a darkened expression. Thanks for the warning, Knight Evelyn. He had almost been duped. Rain felt that searching for witchcraft formulas at such mysterious markets was like hunting for antiques at Pangaean Market in his past. Life want to pick up a genuine artifact. It's not to say it's impossible, but the chances are extremely low and one needs to have a discerning eye. Don't mention it, Knight Rain, it's just that I have a bit more experience than you. Finding good items here is still very difficult, Evelyn said with a slight smile. Minster Province capital. Special Envoy, Javier Stewart in his office, received the assessment materials for you this ennoblement from Theo of Rosby City, and was quite surprised for a moment. Because the name at the top was Rain. He had thought that Rain might achieve a good result, but after seeing his performance this time, it truly shocked him. What did scoring over 2,000 points signify? He was very clear about it. After pondering, he quickly stamped the approved seal on the documents and immediately sent them off to Imperial City. 2 days later, Baron Theo was initially quite happy after receiving a reply from the Imperial Elders' Council. However, accompanying it was a piece of paper in the style of an invitation, which immediately made Viscount Theo's face turn solemn as he whispered, "It's a sword-bearer invitation." Subsequently, he slightly shook his head and sighed, "It seems that I failed to earn General Zilva's favor after all." After thinking it over, he felt it necessary to inform Zilva of this bad news prematurely to prevent further fruitless efforts from him. Just as he reached the office door of Zilva, he heard an unmistakably angry voice from inside. "That fool in Meister County actually rejected my order. Let me see, the one who rejected it is a baron named Alonso Habs. Oh, Habs, this person must be a direct descendant of Count Habs." As he mentioned Habs, Zilva was clearly surprised since, though he was stationed far in Rossby County, he was naturally aware of Count Habs, the responsible person of the neighboring county. Since under current administrative authority, Rain is naturally subordinate to Meister County. Any orders to transfer Rain should in principle go through Meister County. For horizontal or non-direct superior department orders, Meister County has the right to refuse or reject them, unless it is from Münster Province or a higher level order. Hearing this, Viscount Theo outside the door felt a surge of joy and quickly knocked on the door. "Knock, knock, knock. Come in. Lord Viscount, your timing is perfect." Upon seeing Theo, Zilva involuntarily repeated his grievances. "No way. If the face of the Sixth Fleet is not enough, then I will issue the order under the name of the Imperial Southern Naval Fleet. I want to see who in Meister County dares to reject it." After listening to Zilva's complaints, Viscount Theo responded with a wry smile and reassurance. "General, I think you need not be angry. Perhaps you should first take a look at this." Zilva, puzzled, took the invitation handed over by Viscount Theo. He saw an invitation he recognized yet rarely encountered before him. The invitation depicted 5 giant dragons of different postures, flying in the sky. These were the 5 colored giant dragons. "This is an invitation from the Imperial Sword Bearer Organization. How could it arrive so quickly?" Zilva exclaimed in shock. Initially, Zilva had planned to beat the timing, to recruit Rain under his command before some special departments in the Empire noticed this promising individual. After all, on the Empire scale, the Southern Naval Fleet was a huge entity responsible for the security of Imperial territories. After transferring Rain, even if a special department wanted someone transferred, it would not be so easy. They could at least engage in some bureaucratic wrangling, and even if they ended up transferring him away, it could gain some other forms of compensation. But now, his order from the Sixth Fleet has been rejected by Meister County, and the sword-bearer's invitation has already arrived. These days turned out to be a flurry of futile activity. Exactly, General. Once Rain receives this invitation, he will be a candidate for the sword-bearers. Hence, even if you succeed in poaching him, the significance isn't substantial. Zilva thought for a moment, sighed, and said, "Indeed, instead of this, it might be better to train someone on my own." "Lord Viscount, I will leave the announcement to you when it's time. I won't go over to Rain's side, so I'll leave it to you." As for Rain, he naturally had no idea about these intricate twists and turns. Rain was also completely unaware that he missed a chance to participate in a great voyage, experiencing the vast, tumultuous ocean and clashing with pirates for treasures. The Navy's home inn, a room on the 2nd floor. A rhythmic yet steady knock suddenly came. Rain opened the door and was slightly startled to see the important figure he had only met during the ennoblement examination before him. This man, dressed in noble hunting attire and sporting a handlebar mustache, appeared to be Viscount Theo. Title Mary, the female major, had told him. "Lord Viscount, good day." Rain quickly invited him into the room. Clearly, the visitor must have an important matter to discuss. Theo entered the room with a smile, looked around, and seeing that Rain's belongings were neatly arranged in the inn-room, his approval of Rain grew even more. Who said Rain had no sense of order? Clearly, he had plenty. "Knight Rain, I have just received a letter from the Imperial Ennoblement Examination Committee. Your excellent performance in the examination has been reviewed and approved, so you will be granted the title of Baron." "Thank you, Lord Viscount." Rain immediately rejoiced, his fists clenched slightly. The dust had settled, and starting from today, he was a noble, a baron. "However, Knight Rain, perhaps you might be more interested in seeing this." Viscount Theo handed over a piece of paper styled as an invitation with a broad smile. Rain took the invitation letter, his heart already faintly guessing what it might entail. It was a pale cyan invitation, made from no ordinary paper, but what struck Rain the most was the design on its surface. 5 dragons with different postures, soaring through the sky. When Rain opened it, he only saw one line of text. "Rain Carlin is hereby invited to participate in the sword-bearer selection of the Dragon Empire's Münster Province 3 months from now." Upon closer inspection, at the bottom right-hand corner, there was another line of small text outlining the selection's time and place. The last day of the month of vitality, no. 1 Shaded Boulevard, Mingster. It was indeed an invitation to become a sword bearer. However, the invitation was quite different from what Rain had anticipated. Initially, Rain thought that receiving the so-called invitation letter would mean immediate membership into the ranks of the Empire's sword bearers, but it seemed that was not the case. It turned out that the meaning of this invitation letter was to invite a person to qualify for the selection process. This was similar to a production crew from a previous life being invited to a film festival. Whether they would win an award was uncertain, but it implied, your production has caught the attention of the jury, it stands a good chance of winning an award. Similarly, this sword-bearer invitation letter conveyed, Rain, your performance has been notable, we have taken notice, you might succeed. Nonetheless, as long as the opportunity was present, Rain believed he could seize it. On the other hand, the vast majority of people would never have such an opportunity in their lifetime, nor would they come into contact with a sword-bearer invitation letter. Even though there were further selections to be made, this was undoubtedly good news. 2 pieces of good news in a row left Rain struggling to hide the excitement in his heart. At this moment, Viscount Theo, who was nearby, noticed Rain had finished reading the invitation letter, and with a smile, he kindly reminded him. Not every newly appointed knight who receives a commendation is granted a sword-bearer invitation. Only a few among those who are top-ranked receive such invitations. By the way, Rain, perhaps you should take some time soon to think about designing a coat of arms that represents your baron status. A coat of arms? Rain immediately snapped out of his thoughts and nodded. He remembered that, like the carriage from the Crawley Baron family that had come to pick him up numerous times, it bore the exclusive emblem of the Crawley family, a kite shield with a rose-like flower on it. However, according to Jenny, there seemed to be some customary rules to follow when designing a coat of arms. These rules had gradually become a consensus among the nobility over the many years since the establishment of the Dragon Empire. For example, images like lions and crowns were typically not included in the coat of arms design of families that were not dukes or marquises, let alone those of a lower status. For example, a shield in the coat of arms might signify that the family's combat skill is renowned for a particular shield technique. Of course, it could also indicate sword and shield or hammer and shield combat skills, etc. But if your family is not proficient in shield-related combat skills, yet you use a shield as the emblem, it would be ridiculed by other nobles. Upon reflection, Rain thought he would need to consult with the Crawley Baron's wife or Jenny upon his return. Indeed, you have plenty of time, Rain. Once you have decided, you can submit it, Viscount Theo added. There is another matter. On the last Sunday of the month of green grass, new barons and viscounts within Mingster province of the past year need to go to the provincial capital Mingster to receive formal ennoblement by the Duke of Mingster. Of course, this is merely an ennoblement ceremony. You, Rain, are already a baron and can enjoy all the privileges that come with the title. The Duke of Mingster simply represents His Majesty, the Emperor, in conferring the titles upon you. You are swearing allegiance to His Majesty, the Emperor, and the Empire. Since Theo knew from the records that Rain was of common birth, he elaborated in detail. Rain nodded, signaling his understanding. The month of green grass, The sword-bearer invitation letter marked the month of vitality, which according to the calendar of his previous life corresponded roughly to March, and the month of green grass represented April. It seemed certain that in 3 months he would need to make a trip to Mingster. Additionally, the series of noble privileges you enjoy after becoming a baron, such as the right to debate and immunity, can be learned at a leisurely pace once you return home. As he spoke, Theo handed a small booklet to Rain, saying, Rain, I look forward to your future performance. Should there be no unexpected events, we may meet again in Mingster. Viscount Theo smiled and then left the room. The 2 attendants by the door followed suit, the group departing from the Navy Home Inn. For Rain, his journey for the ennoblement assessment had nearly ended perfectly. He had not expected that within just 3 days he would receive the assessment results and the sword-bearer invitation letter. The efficiency of the Empire's operations had brought him an immense surprise. After a brief consideration, he decided to pack his bags and set off early for home, eager to share the good news with his parents and his sister Bo-He. However, as Rain descended the stairs, he unexpectedly saw a striking figure waiting for him on the first floor of the Navy Home Inn. There stood Major Mary Caw, looking at Rain with a smile as he carried his luggage. Taking 2 steps forward, she said, "Knight Rain, no, rather Baron Rain, are you ready to head back?" "Major Marika, just call me Rain." Rain naturally could tell there was no malice in the other party's words. "Baron Rain, have you considered taking a position in the Navy? Given the capability you demonstrated in this ennoblement assessment, you would surely be heavily utilized. The South Seas Fleet also needs capable young talents like you to join." Rain raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected that Major Marika would directly recruit him to join the Navy. Honestly, if he hadn't received an invitation from the sword bearers, he would seriously have considered her suggestion. Because in terms of opportunities and the scale of the organization, the Imperial Navy, no, just the South Seas Fleet alone, far exceeded Meister County. The promotion opportunities there, as well as the potential to encounter various kinds of witchcraft, naturally far surpassed those available in the remote Meister County. But now, this recruitment had lost its allure to Rain. Instead, dealing with many trivial matters in the meantime would drain a lot of his energy. For now, Rain planned to settle his family affairs and then find a time to head to the Golden Coast to seek further enhancement of his capabilities from Master Ganther. Because this was the most efficient and safest choice to improve his capabilities. Of course, handling certain mysterious events had brought Rain handsome rewards, but the inherent risks could not be entirely ignored. "Thank you for the invitation, Major Marika. I have long admired the Imperial Navy, but unfortunately, I have already received an invitation from a special department of the Empire, so I am truly very sorry," Rain sincerely said. He mainly did not mention the sword bearers because he did not want to give Marika the impression of boasting. "Oh, so soon." A trace of surprise flashed across Marika's beautiful face. How could the special department of the Empire have contacted Rain so quickly? With such capability and efficiency, could it be? "Baron Rain, the special department you mentioned, it wouldn't happen to be the Empire's sword bearers, would it?" Marika couldn't help but ask curiously. "Eh? How did you know? It indeed is the sword bearers," Rain nodded. This in turn surprised Rain, as Viscount Theo was unlikely to spread such news actively. This meant Marika had guessed it herself, and Major Marika suddenly seemed to realize something. No wonder, when she had talked with General Zilva about why not invite Rain to the South Seas Fleet, General Zilva had cryptically said, "You might try, but I certainly can't." It appeared that General Zilva had already known about Rain receiving the invitation from the Empire's sword bearers at that time. Resultantly, she had excitedly taken it upon herself to become this mediator. The old fox was taking a shot in the dark to see if he could persuade Rain to stay. Understanding this brought a slight flush to Marika's cheeks. Rain, observing Major Marika, felt a bit puzzled. Why was the Major showing a bashful expression? But her naval uniform combined with this shy expression indeed formed a beautiful scene. Indeed, several men nearby were already staring, dumbstruck. "Then Baron Rain, I wish you a smooth journey. Remember to write to me." Having realized there was no hope for Rain to join the Navy, Marika quickly adjusted her mood, smiling as she waved her hand. "Thank you, Major Marika, I will, and you are welcome to visit Meister County anytime," Rain said with a smile. After bidding farewell to Marika, Rain, carrying his luggage, came to the stables at the side of the Navy Home Inn, placed his luggage on a chestnut horse, then mounted a black horse, merging into the street crowds. However, Rain didn't head north directly to Meister County, but proceeded towards the noble residential area west of Rossby City. Soon he arrived at the entrance of a luxurious mansion where the servant at the door immediately opened the gate, smiling as he greeted. "Knight Rain, Miss Evelyn is with her friends at the training ground." This was Evelyn's home. Ever since Rain had encountered Evelyn unexpectedly at Nightingale Market, their relationship had quickly warmed up. Yesterday, at Evelyn's invitation, Rain had visited her home, so the servants at the door were familiar with Rain, the young man who was a new friend of the Miss. Initially, Viscountess Norman, curious yet slightly worried that her daughter had invited a young man she had never met before to their home as a guest, felt reassured when she met Rain and realized he was of commoner heritage, which was quite different from Evelyn's status, even though he was a newly knighted knight. But when Evelyn said, "Mother, Rain is very likely to be the first in this ennoblement assessment," Viscountess Norman immediately dropped her objections, even strongly supporting her daughter to invite Rain over more often, saying it was proper to show extensive hospitality. This left Evelyn somewhat speechless. With her friends at the training ground, Rain didn't think much of it, stopping the servant from taking the horse to the stable for care, but instead followed the servant, riding directly to the training ground located beside the mansion's back garden, because he planned to greet them and then head straight back to Flashgold Town. There he saw Evelyn, a redhead, sparring in combat skill with a male knight about her age. Aside from servants and guards obviously dressed in service uniforms, 3 men and a woman wearing noble hunting outfits or knight armor was spectating.